This is a Fox News alert. I'm Bret Baier in Washington. The winnowing of the Republican presidential field has begun. Former Texas Governor Rick Perry announced just moments ago that he's out.
Today, I'm suspending my campaign for the presidency of the United States. We have a tremendous field of candidates. Probably the greatest group of men and women. I step aside knowing our party's in good hands.
Now, many saw this writing on the wall. Perry's exit speech, though, was filled with warnings for his party. Joining us now, Chief Political Correspondent Carl Cameron. Hi, Carl.
Bitter day for Perry, folks. His problem was both his last campaign and this time, really, his inability to raise money. His speeches and his campaign style did get better from 2012, but he never took off in the polls this time. He'd been closing offices across this country. He had been not paying staffers for quite some time. And to their credit, all of the senior staffers and many of the others working for him kept working for the last month plus. He took some choice parting shots at Donald Trump about substance-free rhetoric and had been one of the critics of Mr. Trump really since the beginning when Trump made his first announcement. Now the field is -1.
A pair of non-politicians have broken away from the pack in Iowa, where Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker, who led polls 2 months ago, is now 10th. The next debate's in 5 days. Trump leads, but Ben Carson's right on his heels. The rest are far back in single digits. Trump resorted this week to questioning Carson's reputation as a renowned neurosurgeon and his faith. Carson refuses to trade insults with Trump. He's hot right now. All 3 cable news channels took his news conference live from near Ferguson, Missouri today, and he calmly gave the same answers to the same questions on race and other issues he faces daily.
All Black lives matter, including the ones that are eradicated by abortions.
Others are taking on Trump as a narcissistic, egomaniacal madman, running a campaign of insults instead of ideas. They warn it hurts the GOP and helps Hillary Clinton. But Trump's image is positive in Iowa. Carson's sky high, but Trump's among 7 candidates viewed favorably by 60% or more of likely GOP caucus goers. Trump's media domination and ratings-grabbing rhetoric eclipses the competition and serious policy discussions, making it difficult for some to coax contributions out of donors. The stakes are high for next Wednesday's debate at the Reagan Library in California. After adjusting the rules, the only woman in the GOP race, Carly Fiorina, has been added, expanding the roster to 11 on CNN's primetime stage. The qualifying rules for the rest of the field in an earlier debate that evening have eliminated former Virginia Governor Jim Gilmore, who failed to reach the needed 1% in at least 3 national polls.
Trump and Jeb Bush are virtually tied for the lead in one category of the Q poll. 20 to 25% of Iowa caucus goers say they definitely will not vote for either of them. Tough business, particularly for Perry today.
Think Perry endorses quickly?
Well, it'll probably take some time to think it over and figure out how best to use the influence that he has. He does have some supporters still. They were out there in Iowa, just not enough to make him float.
Okay, Carl, thank you. Now to 9/11. Most people can tell you exactly where they were 14 years ago today. A day when America stood in shock over a brutal and deadly series of attacks that killed 3,000 innocent people and changed the world forever. Since then, billions of dollars and countless lives have been devoted to the struggle against the kind of people who perpetrated those crimes. We have Fox team coverage of this solemn day. James Rosen at the White House with how the Obama administration is pursuing the war on terror now. But we begin with senior correspondent Rick Leventhal at Ground Zero tonight. Hi, Rick.
Good evening, Brett. The crowd grows a bit smaller each year, and the wounds may heal a bit more, but this remains the most difficult day of the year for the relatives of the victims of the 9/11 attacks who come here to remember and pay respects and also give thanks for the support of the city and the nation.
Richard Dennis Allen. Richard L. Allen. Christopher E. Allingham.
A moving and often heartbreaking ritual repeated for the 14th year.
I love you and miss you every day, Michael.
Loved ones of the nearly 3,000 lives lost on 9/11/2001, reading the names of every man, woman, and child taken from this earth in the terror attacks that forever changed America.
And my brother-in-law, Peter Milano. Pete, you truly missed every single day. We love you. You're always in our hearts.
It's a tough day. We're surrounded on the memorial by thousands upon thousands of family members that are remembering this was the day that their loved one got up in the morning and went to work and didn't come home.
At the Pentagon, a huge flag unfurled, a reminder of the stars and stripes that were draped across the building after the attack. The President and First Lady among those recognizing 6 moments of silence. When the planes hit the towers, when each tower fell, when Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon, and when passengers on Flight 93 fought back against the hijackers, crashing into a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania. A new visitor center opened at the Shanksville site, with loved ones and first responders paying their respects again today.
My father, Donald Freeman Green.
And today, on this 14th anniversary, much of the focus is on the future, with calls to educate our children about what happened on 9/11, since so many were born after the attacks, and on funding to support the memorial and the museum, and also to help pay the health care costs of the thousands of first responders said to be battling illnesses connected to their work on the pile so many years ago. That funding set to run out next year. Brett?
Rick Leventhal live at Ground Zero. Rick, thank you. Today is also the anniversary of the terror strikes that left 4 Americans dead in Benghazi, Libya in 2012. The father of one of them tells Fox News he is not going to let the story die. Charles Woods, whose son was former Navy SEAL Ty Woods, who was killed in Benghazi, accuses the Obama administration of a cover-up and wants to know what was said between then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and President Obama. Clinton is expected to testify before the House committee investigating the Benghazi attacks next month. President Obama said today he's had strong disagreements with the man who launched the global war on terror, his predecessor, George W. Bush. But in remarks today to troops, the incumbent president said he gives former President Bush, quote, great credit for bringing Americans together in the immediate aftermath of the 9/11 attacks. Tonight, Chief Washington correspondent James Rosen reports from the White House on how the jihadist threat has evolved and even grown under President Obama's watch.
In a town hall with troops at Fort Meade and others stationed worldwide, President Obama argued that core al-Qaeda has been dismantled.
But what's happened with this radical violent extremism is that it's metastasized and it's spread to other areas. And right now, ground zero for those activities is in Syria with ISIL.
Indeed, in the battle against ISIS, the terrorist group that's overrun large swaths of Iraq and Syria since 2013, U.S. officials said coalition aircraft have struck 6,700 targets and shrunk ISIS's operating space by 30% inside Iraq.
But you don't feel comfortable saying we're winning.
Well, that's an assessment that the Department of Defense could share with you, and there is an
Commander-in-Chief, and you speak for him.
There is an understandable tendency to want to do a little, play-by-play of a military conflict. Important progress has been made, but there is a tremendous amount of work that remains to be done.
So help you God. So help me God.
Over President Obama's first term, the number of Salafi jihadist groups exploded by 58%, according to a Pentagon study prepared last year by the Rand Corporation. That makes accurate intelligence more critical, even as the Pentagon probes allegations that assessments of our campaign against ISIS are being sanitized. An Obama spokesman said the president has confidence in the nation's spy agencies, but what about the ISIS intel he's received over the last 6 months?
You are declining an opportunity to say he did have confidence in that intelligence.
I think what I'm declining to do is to interfere in an ongoing independent investigation.
I've said all along the president's narrative has downplayed the threat. And I believe that the world is a more dangerous place today than it was before 9/11.
Aides to President Obama also said the U.S. has spent the last several months ramping up its capabilities to contend with terrorism sponsored and supported by the nation with which the president has negotiated his signature diplomatic initiative, Iran. Brett.
James Rosen live on the North Lawn. James, thank you. Russia's foreign minister is calling on world powers to help equip the Syrian army so it can fight against ISIS terrorists. But Fox News has learned there may be much more to the Russian buildup in the world's most dangerous neighborhood. National security correspondent Jennifer Griffin is at the Pentagon tonight.
A secret deal hammered out between Iranian Quds Force commander Qasem Soleimani and Russian President Vladimir Putin during a secret visit to Moscow in July resulted in the buildup of Russian fighting forces in Syria. Western intelligence sources tell Fox News the escalated Russian military presence began just days after Soleimani and Putin's meeting, first reported by Fox News in early August. The Pentagon has tracked an 8th Antonov military cargo plane which flew via Iran, landing in Latakia. The president addressed Russia's military support for Syria in a troop talk today at Fort Meade.
We are going to be engaging Russia to let them know that you can't continue to double down on a strategy that's doomed to failure.
Sources say there are now more than 1,000 Russian combatants, some of them from the same plainclothes special forces units who were sent to Ukraine, members of an airborne rifle brigade, the equivalent of U.S. Army Rangers. Ukraine's president says Russia is using the same playbook they did in Crimea.
These days, green men are landing in the hundreds in Syria.
The State Department continues to publicly downplay the reports.
I don't know that I would call it a buildup. It's unclear exactly what some of these military activities are all about. I don't know that we're ready at this point to call it a buildup necessarily.
Soleimani visited Moscow from July 24th through 26th, just 10 days after the nuclear deal was announced, despite a travel ban and UN Security Council resolutions barring him from leaving Iran.
Israeli security officials have been quoted saying Iran has sent hundreds of fighters into Syria in recent days to work with the Russians. Brett?
Jennifer Griffin at the Pentagon. Jennifer, thank you. Up next, why Vice President Joe Biden may not run for president in his own words. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 30 in Jacksonville with the arrest of a Florida man who authorities say tried to help an undercover FBI agent explode a pressure cooker bomb at the 9/11 memorial in Kansas City. The suspect allegedly claimed responsibility for helping inspire terrorist attacks in Texas and Australia. Fox 45 in Baltimore with the announcement from Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake that she will not seek re-election. This comes just days after city officials authorized a $6.5 million settlement with the family of a man who died in police custody and the controversy over how she handled the ensuing protests. And this is a live look at Detroit from our affiliate Fox 2. The big story there tonight, the expulsion of one Republican state lawmaker and the resignation of another in a bizarre sex scandal. Representative Todd Courser admitted sending a phony email accusing himself of being a, quote, bisexual, porn-addicted sex deviant. The email was aimed at making his real-life affair with a female lawmaker seem less believable if it were exposed by an anonymous blackmailer. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back.